Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. And today I'm joined by Sam Cuellar, who is an underwater archaeologist with Naval History and Heritage Command. Underwater archaeology is part of the Collections Management Division of Naval History and Heritage Command, and we are here in their conservation lab at the Washington, D.C. Navy Yard. And today we've got another video in our series about raising and preserving a World War II American Devastator torpedo bomber that has been underwater since 1942. Mm-hmm. So you are leading this project. Can you tell us a little bit about where the project is right now and where we're going in the future?
Sure. So, the announcement was just made here at the end of January. And so we have our kickoff meeting here coming in the early part of May. And this year is really focused on getting the team on the same page. We're having the kickoff meeting. We want to engage with our counterparts in the Republic of the Marshall Islands to make sure that we're following all of their cultural protocols as far as permitting and historic preservation and environmental concerns and anything that the national government and the local governments may have there. So that's really the focus of this year. Go ahead.
Sorry. Before we go into all that, maybe you should tell us a little bit about all the various folks who are involved in this project, besides Naval History and Heritage Command.
Sure. So, as you just said, it's the Naval History and Heritage Command here. We also have the Air Sea Heritage Foundation, who have been long stewards of checking out this site over the last, since 2003, 2004. And then with Texas A&M University, you have the Center for Maritime Archaeology and Conservation, who will handle a lot of the on-hands archaeology and conservation of the aircraft long term.
And then we've got the Marshall Islands, of course, and the U.S. government are working together on this.
Yep.
That's fantastic that everybody agrees how historically significant this is and are able to come together on this project.
Yeah, and kind of looking at this in stages, all these groups are going to come together along with the National Museum of the U.S. Navy to be able to hopefully eventually display this once it's conserved. It really breaks down into four main chunks of where we want to be with this project. Mm-hmm. So this first year, is getting all the groundwork in place, understanding the logistics, understanding what needs to be accomplished from permitting and everything else. So that's step one. Mm-hmm. Step two is going to be the actual archaeology and recovery. And so going there, and the site has been very well documented over the last 22 years, but and there are certain pieces that are missing. You're missing the caps for the float bags on the wings. There's no tail wheel. There is, a couple other pieces of the cowling that are missing from around the engine that have just fallen off either during the crashing and the dishing process or just from degradation in time. And so, we want to see if any of those are laying just underneath the sediment nearby. We want to make sure that the plane is in good condition to be able to be recovered. And then that process is kind of the second step. Let's get the plane off the seafloor and back to the United States for conservation. Step three is going to be the conservation process, which, as we've mentioned a couple of times, it's a very complex machine. And that is going to be probably the bulk of the time that this actually is being worked on. And then the last is going to be transportation to be displayed in the National Museum. And so those are kind of the four big steps from inception to finally getting it to where the public can see it.
As we're doing the conservation, is the idea to conserve the aircraft as it would have looked flying off of Yorktown, or to conserve it as it looks on the seafloor right now?
So the idea is as you see it here in this model, is to make it look like this. We want to preserve it as it looks now on the seabed. There have been many planes that have been restored over the years from many different contexts. Some of them are airworthy, some of them aren't, and just in display in museum. And those are all great. But the idea behind this is once a plane or a ship kind of goes beneath the waves, its story doesn't stop. And so you have a story of not just the people that inhabited and lived, fought and died on these vessels or these aircraft, but you have a story that really tells of it's kind of its news story. It serves as a preservation of history. It serves as an environment, an ecosystem for things underneath the water. And I think keeping it this way really represents all of that, because there's so much of naval history and kind of naval heritage that it's not lost just because it's beneath the waves. It tells a slightly different story, but that story is still there to be told, and kind of keeping it in this, some would call it unpreserved state, Some would call it a stabilized state, something like that. But it really tells us a different story that's really not told in a lot of museums today.
That really excites me. Putting facsimile parts on there that aren't original to make it look original, that's not really historic, but I'm not a scuba diver. I'll never get to go down and see an artifact like this the way you have. But I grew up watching documentaries of finding PT-109 or finding Yorktown, things like that. So it's really exciting that somebody like me, terminally landlocked, will get the chance to see a good representation of what one of these wreck sites looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's I feel very fortunate to be able to go see these sites as they lay, you know, on the seafloor in a lot of instances, and being able to share that with the public and share the story not of necessarily just the 3 crew members that were part of this aircraft specifically, but to be able to extrapolate that and saying these other Navy losses, these other aircraft, this is what they look like underwater, and this is how they're preserved. And when somebody looks at the exhibit one day when it's displayed, you can see that all these pieces are original to the plane. There's no facsimile here. Things that are missing were lost because of the way that it was ditched in the actual event to how it got to this place in this moment. Or, it tells some of the personal stories of the crew that ditched and then survived for the rest of the war after being picked up by the Japanese a couple days after they ditched this in the lagoon.
Oh, that's really impressive that you're talking about both interpreting this as the work site of 3 men and like telling their story, but also using this to tell a story of underwater exploration and to tell a story of this entire type of aircraft that very much held the line on its own for the first 6 months of the Pacific War. It's not represented anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, it's amazing too to have the opportunity to take such a storied aircraft and being able to share the story, but to have that story have so many different meanings to so many different backgrounds of people. And not only that, but you think of, this has been in the Marshall Islands now for just about 84 years. And it also tells a story about the Marshall Islands. You had the Marshallese that took in these crew members from the 2 planes, these 6 airmen, and then, they protected them until the Japanese came and took them and put them into a camp for the rest of the war. But in some ways, they've also kind of stewarded this aircraft. And so it's really unique to be able to tell that story too, because even though this plane will be returned to the United States, it really tells the story of the Marshall Islands in some ways, almost like an ambassador from the Marshall Islands to the United States and the people of the United States to share this story.
It's also incredible that 90% of this aircraft's life, it's been here on the seafloor, and for 20% of its life or a quarter of its life, it's been monitored and observed, and it's really incredible to me that we've been able to go down there and watch this.
Yeah, and it's certainly, a testament to the groups that have been involved in this. It's kind of the leadership of the Air Sea Heritage Foundation that started off with Tiger, the International Group for Historic Aviation or Aircraft Recovery, really kind of started this in 2003. And then, the initial plane, not this one, but 0298 was found in, I believe, 1997 by National Park and Marshallese joint survey. And then this one was found a couple of years later by a couple of divers American expat divers out of Majuro. And so, it's had this long legacy now of discovery, and every time I feel like they visit the site, they've found another discovery of the aircraft. This is how it's deteriorating. This is what the environment is doing to it. And there's just little changes over time. But the downside of that is there's a counting down clock on this site. And it has to do with every archaeological site that's underwater is deterioration, whether it's fast or slow, is inevitably going to reclaim all these sites someday. And the hope is to be able to recover this, just like we talked about, to share with people of all backgrounds.
That's fantastic. I'm super excited to get my chance to see this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to think of all the steps that have to happen.
and none of those steps are going to happen without funding. So there is a link in the description below, a website where you can find more information about this, and also where you can donate to support the upcoming 4 processes that have to happen, the 4 steps that are in the works to bring this plane back to the surface where we can see it. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, as well as from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate that support. Remember to support the Devastator Project so that we can bring this guy back to the surface. You can support Battleship New Jersey by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find about our museum and the channel. Thanks for watching.